A story about the mysterious ability of the gentle giant to heal people's ailments takes place on death row. The lead guard attempts to prevent the execution of the condemned man, after seeing that he has a talent. In the 1930s, at the Louisiana State Prison, a young Paul Edgecombe has a urinary tract illness. Brutus Brutal Howell, Dean Stanton, Harry Terwilliger, and Percy Wetmore were a few of the other guards, brought a fresh prisoner. Percy makes a big show out of the arrival, proclaiming dead man walking around the complex several times to the chagrin of the other guards. The prisoner is named John Coffey, which means like the drink, only not spelled the same. He is a huge, powerful black man, but when Paul speaks with him, they discover that he is quite timid and appears to be afraid of the dark. Following his confinement to his cell, John says mysteriously that he tried to take it back, but it was too late. Upon receiving a copy of John Coffey's file, Paul discovers that the man was condemned to death on death row for the apparent rape and murder of two young girls. After the two girls went missing, a posse went in search for them, discovering John sitting in an open field, crying hysterically while holding the lifeless girls in his arms. As he was arrested, John says that he tried to take it back, but it was too late. Later, Paul is outside talking to Warden Hal Moores. Warden Moores mentioned that Melinda, his wife, is not feeling well. Her headaches are severe, and an X-ray is planned to determine the cause of the issue. The following day, Brutus discovers a mouse in the cell block. They watch as it dashes into a tiny alcove. The guards search the entire room, but they are unable to locate the mouse. A few hours later, Percy shows up, discovers the mouse, and becomes enraged as he attempts to kill it. Percy is about to enter the padded room when the mouse returns there. Paul then chastises Percy for frightening the prisoners while he was chasing the mouse. Percy is unconcerned since he views the prisoners as deplorable. Brutus grabs him, but Percy threatens to use his contacts as the governor's wife's nephew to get the other people fired if they hurt him. Paul responds that they will have a go at him, even if it means losing their employment, if he ever poses such a threat again. While they rehearse, Toot Toot, the elderly jail cleaner, assists them. As the others prepare the electric chair, Paul tells Percy to observe and absorb. A guard explains to Percy that the execution will go more smoothly if a wet sponge is applied to the convict's head prior to the cap containing the electrodes. This will allow the electric current to pass right through the head. The following day, Dell, the prisoner, finds the mouse once more and calls it Mr. Jingles as he attempts to tame it. As a gimmick, the mouse can retrieve a spool of thread. When Paul and Warden Hal meet again, Hal is nearly in tears since the doctors have informed him that his wife Melinda has a lemon-sized brain tumor that is almost impossible to remove and will eventually kill her. That evening, Paul experiences significantly greater discomfort from his urine infection. He is in pain nearly all the time. Percy and Harry go to get Wharton from the mental hospital, where he is in an apparent trance, most likely from medication. As soon as Wharton gets inside the mile, he surprise attacks the guards, and injures Paul by kneeing him in the groin. Dean is almost strangled, and Percy is pinned to the floor in shock, unable to intervene despite Paul's calls for help. At last, Brutus enters and removes Wharton. When the others are gone, he gives way in pain. Then John Coffey requests a conversation with Paul. Paul tries very hard to go to John's cell, but John grabs him and covers his groin with his hand. The lights flash dazzlingly. Then John released it, gasping and coughing until a swarm of gnat-like spores emerged from his mouth and vanished into thin air. When Paul asks what transpired, John is limited to saying "I helped." He grows weary and falls asleep. Paul later goes to the restroom and is completely pain-free because John Coffey's act has cured him of his infection. Paul feels like a new man when he gets home and spends nearly the entire night making love to his wife. Paul travels to the city to visit John Coffey's public lawyer, Bert Hammersmith, who presided over John's trial. Paul expresses his doubt about Coffey, saying he can no longer hold such a nice and loving man accountable for a horrific act. Hammersmith, on the other hand, is adamant about Coffey's guilt and likens John to the dog that once attacked his own son without cause. The following day, Paul gives John a loaf of cornbread that his wife prepared in appreciation for Coffey's assistance. Coffey shares the cornbread with Dell and Mr. Jingles. After urinating on Harry's shoes out of wrath and spitting chocolate filling from a moon pie all over Brutus, the guards use a fire hose to catch Wharton off guard before putting him in a straitjacket and sending him to the padded room. Dell's execution date is approaching. Dell is mostly worried about what will become of Mr. Jingles. Brutus suggests that he be sent to a fantastical area in Florida called Mouseville, but not before Dell performs a play for the jail staff with Mr. Jingles. Dell and Mr. Jingles perform his show. Paul has made the decision to place Percy in charge, in the hope that he will finally leave the prison right away afterward. Dell's play is a huge success. Percy's practice went well, so it appears that for once, the two men get along. Wharton grabs Percy through the bars after he approaches the cages too closely. Percy wets himself in fear while Wharton threatens him for a bit before letting him go. He tells the guards not to tell anyone about this, embarrassed. However, Dell takes great pleasure in humiliating Percy, much to Percy's ire. Later on, Mr. Jingles sprints from cell to cell across the room. Percy approaches and stomps on the mouse, with a callous disregard for his actions, causing Dell screaming in agony. John Coffey asks for the mouse. Paul picks it up and gives it to John Coffey as he requested. The other guards stare as light shoots from John's hands, looking on in disbelief, amazement, and maybe dread. When John coughs, spores fly up into the air once more, and Mr. Jingles flees across the room. When Percy discovers the mouse is unharmed, he becomes enraged, believing the guards are trying to make a joke of him. Paul confronts Percy and issues a warning. Either he transfers outright once following Delacroix's execution, or the others will reveal Percy's history of abusing the convicts and his poor behavior on the mile. Percy concurs. On the eve of Dell's execution, Dell hands Mr. Jingles over to Paul. Following Paul's observation that he cannot have a mouse perched on his shoulder when he is being executed, John Coffey offers to look after Mr. Jingles. Dell is positioned on the chair in front of the audience as Percy begins the ceremony. In his final words, a tearful Dell begs Paul to remember Mouseville and pleads for forgiveness for his transgressions. Percy continues by connecting Dell to the electrodes, with one minor exception: he deliberately does not moisten the sponge he places on Dell's head. All to realize the sponge is dry, but it's too late, the electricity has already started. Because of this, Dell has an agonizing execution. He convulses and yells in anguish, much to the increasing horror of the audience. They are, however, observing as Dell's suffering worsens to the point where he even catches fire. The appalled audience begins to panic and leaves the scene, despite Hal Moore's insistence that everything is fine. Although Percy is turning away, Paul makes him watch until Dell passes away. He is told by Brutus to use an extinguisher to put out the fire. Subsequently, Brutus strikes Percy with great force. Paul puts Brutus in restraint, telling him that Percy isn't worth fighting for. What's done is done. Hal enters and demands to know what went wrong in an irate manner. Paul holds Percy's lack of experience responsible for the botched execution. Paul speaks with a heartbroken John. Mr. Jingles, who was in John's hands when it occurred, must also have felt Dell's agony, and has escaped. John does not expect him to coming back. The following day, Paul and his wife pay a visit to Hal and Melinda. Melinda appears to be doing okay, but Hal finds that she is unraveling quickly. She is losing her memory and exhibiting extreme behavioral abnormalities, such as frequent swearing. Paul chooses to invite the other guards, aside from Percy, to have a dinner, and discusses John Coffey's acts of curing him together with Mr. Jingles. Paul says he wants to sneak John Coffey out to try to heal Melinda since he can no longer witness what is happening to her. The others, who are quite dubious, remind out that Coffey is a killer with a criminal record and that it would be devastating if they were found out or if he were to get away. Paul states his opinion that Coffey is innocent, saying he does not see God putting a gift like that in the hands of a man who would kill a child. The other guards agree to help because they believe it is worth the danger. The following day, they execute the plan. Paul brings some drinks, and offers one to Wharton that has been drugged, causing him to nod off. After that, the others gag Percy, straitjacket him, and lock him in the cushioned chamber for a few hours. When they open John Coffey's cell, he is thrilled about the chance to assist Melinda outside and take a trip. When they got into the car, Paul asked John where he would be taken tonight. John answered, "Help a lady." Paul and Brutus were wondered why he knew. John replied, "I don't know much of anything." When they get to Hal's house, Hal pulls a shotgun on them because he believes there is an escape attempt or jail riot happening. While Paul gently calms him down, Coffey heads upstairs to meet Melinda. When John gets very near to Melinda's face, and something comes out of her mouth and into his, brightening the entire room and even setting off a minor earthquake. John cuts off his connection with her, collapses, and coughing. Melinda sits up, feeling much better and unable to recall anything from her X-ray experience. Hal breaks down, shedding tears over his wife's recovery. Melinda presents Coffey with a pendant bearing the healer St. Christopher's mark. When the men get back to the prison, John is still really sick from the interaction. After being in isolation, Percy is released and appears agitated. As Percy walks out, John grabs him through the bars, shoots the spores straight into Percy's mouth, then releases him. Dazed, Percy approaches Wharton's cage. Wharton, barely conscious, teases him further. With his revolver, Percy shoots Wharton in the chest. As the others grab Percy, he reclines and clears his throat of the last few black spores. According to John, Wharton and Percy were bad men, and he punished them accordingly. He extends his hand and tells Paul that he must see for himself. The other guards object, but Paul holds John's hand, and he instantly begins to glimpse the memories of Wharton that John is carrying. Wharton worked as a farm laborer where the two little girls lived. One night, he snuck into their chamber and abducted them. He threatened to kill the other if they let out a scream. While the electricity surrounding them goes crazy once more, Paul discovers that Wharton was accountable for the double murder for which John Coffey was convicted for. After finally let go, John tells a distraught Paul that Wharton killed the girls because of their love for each other. Percy is whisked away and admitted to a mental hospital. Ironically, the same place where he was meant to be an administrator there. The following day, Paul and the others speak with Coffey, even asking him if they should just let him go. Coffey refuses to flee since he doesn't want to cause issue for them. With regards to the approaching execution, Paul questions John how he could ever explain killing an innocent man before God. John told him not to worry. He discloses that in addition to healing, he is also capable of feeling the pain of everyone around him. Since he doesn't want this suffering and darkness in the world, the execution would be an act of kindness. Paul offers one final request of John, and Coffey says he's always wanted to watch a flicker show. They introduce a movie projector with the movie Top Hat, especially during Fred Astaire's Heaven Dance. As John watching in wonder, saying, "They like angels." Finally, the day of John's execution approaches. John's pendant must be taken, but Paul swears to give it back to him after he passes away. After the guards lead him into the auditorium, John feels the whole crowd is irritated at him, especially the parents of the dead girls, who are jeer loudly at him. John is instructed by Brutus to concentrate on the feelings of the guards, who have nothing but sympathy for him. John is strapped to the chair. As the guards are tearfully stares on him. The guards are unable to conceal their emotions while the ceremony is taking place. As per John's tearful request, John begs Paul not to put the hood since he still feels afraid of the dark, but Paul complies with his sobbing plea. Paul makes extra sure that the sponge is wet before putting the cap on. Paul moves forward and shakes hands to John. He hears John's voice once more saying, "He killed them with their love." When the chair is activated, the execution runs smoothly, and John passes away. Later on, Paul puts the pendant back around neck, and he and Brutus quickly fled the Green Mile, since they could not bear to witness John Coffey die. They moved to an establishment for juvenile offenders. Soon after John Coffey's execution, Paul returns to the mile and discovers the mouse once more. He has kept him ever since. For more videos similar to this, don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. Thank you for watching.